Nammo. Good morning. Thank you for joining me for our daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The first mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I vow to cultivate compassion and learn ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to condone any act of killing in the world, in my thinking, or in my way of life. This morning we're continuing to read Ajahn Thanissaro's essay on the 5 khandhas, or the 5 aggregates, from his book The Karma of Questions. The Buddha introduced the concept of the khandhas in his first sermon in response to the first of these questions. His short definition of suffering was the 5 clinging khandhas. This fairly cryptic phrase can be fleshed out by drawing on other passages in the canon. The 5 khandhas are bundles or piles of form, feeling, perception, fabrications, and consciousness. None of the texts explain why the Buddha used the word khandha to describe these things. The meaning of tree trunk may be relevant to the pervasive fire imagery in the canon, nibbana being extinguishing of the fires of passion, aversion, and delusion. But none of the texts explicitly make this connection. The common and explicit image is of the khandhas as burdensome. We can think of them as piles of bricks we carry on our shoulders. However, these piles are best understood not as objects, but as activities. For an important passage defines them in terms of their functions. Form, which covers physical phenomenon of all sorts, both within and without the body, wears down or deforms. Feeling feels pleasure, pain, and neither pleasure nor pain. Perception labels or identifies objects. Consciousness cognizes the 6 senses, counting the intellect as the 6th, along with their objects. Of the 5 khandhas, fabrication is the most complex. Passages in the canon define it as intention, but it includes a wide variety of activities such as attention, evaluation, and all the active processes of the mind. It is also the most fundamental khandha, for its primary activity is to take the potential for the experience of form, feeling, etc., coming from past actions, and turn it into the actual experience of those things in the present moment. Thus, intention is an integral part of our experience of all the khandhas, an important point, for this means that there is an element of intention in all suffering. This opens the possibility that suffering can be ended by changing our intentions or abandoning them entirely, which is precisely the point of the Buddha's teachings. To understand how this happens, we have to look more closely at how suffering arises, or, in other words, how khandhas become clinging khandhas. When khandhas are experienced, the process of fabrication normally doesn't simply stop there. If attention focuses on the khandha's attractive features, beautiful forms, pleasant feelings, etc., it can give rise to passion and delight. This passion and delight can take many forms, but the most tenacious is the habitual act of fabricating a sense of me or mine, identifying with a particular khandha or set of khandhas, or claiming possession of it. This sense of me and mine is rarely static. It roams like an amoeba, changing its contours as it changes locations. Sometimes expansive, sometimes contracted, it can view itself as identical with a khandha, as possessing a khandha, as existing within a khandha, or as having a khandha existing within itself. At times feeling finite, at other times infinite, Whatever shape it takes, it's always unstable and insecure, for the khandas providing its food are simply activities and functions, inconstant and insubstantial. In the words of the canon, the khandas are like foam, like a mirage, like the bubbles formed when the rain falls on water. They're heavy only because the iron grip of trying to cling to them is burdensome. As long as we're addicted to passion and delight for these activities, as long as we cling to them, we're bound to suffer. The Buddhist approach to ending this suffering, however, is not simply to drop it. As with any addiction, the mind has to be gradually weaned away before we can reach the point of no intention, where we're totally freed from the fabrication of khandas. We have to change our intentions toward the khandas so as to change their functions. Instead of using them for the purpose of constructing a self, we use them for the purpose of creating a path to the end of suffering. Instead of carrying piles of bricks on our shoulders, we take them off and lay them along the ground as pavement. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for joining me this morning.